The regular meeting of the Ethical Practices Board will now begin.
Welcome to the regular meeting of the Ethical Practices Board for March 16th, 2021. My name is Kyle Kroll, and I am the chair of the board. As we begin, I'll note for the record the meeting has remote participation by members and city staff as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the local public health emergency. The city is also recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and its YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. This meeting is public and it is subject to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. Also, because we're on this virtual platform, I would like to remind and request that all members and participants mute their microphones when they are not speaking. At this time, I will ask the court to call the roll so we can verify a quorum.
Board Member Collins.
Present.
Bauk.
Present.
Chair Kroll.
Present.
There are 3 members present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum today. And with that, we will now proceed to the agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. So, turning then to adoption of the agenda for this meeting, may I have a motion to adopt this agenda?
This is Walter Bauk, also move. Second.
All right, so we have a motion by member Bauk and we have a second by member Collins. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Collins.
Aye.
Bauk.
Aye.
Chair Kroll.
Aye.
There are 3 ayes.
3 ayes, that motion then carries and the agenda is adopted. So let's move on to that agenda. The first item, acceptance of minutes from our prior meeting on January 19, 2021. May I have a motion to accept those minutes?
This is Walter Bauk. I'll make that motion as well. Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by member Bauk. I have a second by member Collins. Therefore, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Board Member Collins.
Aye.
Bauk.
Aye.
Chair Kroll.
Aye.
There are 3 ayes.
That motion thus carries and the minutes are accepted. All right, turning to our first substantive item, the Ethics Code Amendment Project. Ms. Trammell?
Thank you, Chair Kroll. As the board may recall, included on the 2021 work plan was a goal to have an examination done of the entire Ethics and Government Code and the bringing to council of any amendments proposed after that review prior to the end of the year. And so in order to accomplish this goal, staff has been working on the first part of this project. And Matt Wilcox has done a fair amount of the most, if not almost all, of that work that was done so far. And he's here to talk about the work that has been done so far.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell, Chair Kroll, members of the board. As the ethics officer just mentioned, we have been conducting a comprehensive review of our ethics code and comparing all of our provisions against the model ethics code, as well as the codes of Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland. And this process involved starting at the very beginning of Chapter 15 with the preamble, and then comparing each of our substantive sections against the provisions of these other cities. As the ethics officer mentioned, this was a rather time-consuming process, but it has also been very informative. One of the key takeaways from this review is that the city of Minneapolis is starting this amendment process from a relatively strong position. Our code, even in its current form, does hold up well when compared against these other cities. And that's not to say there isn't room for improvement. There are certainly ways to simplify the code and to make it hopefully more user-friendly. My concern with ease of use relates specifically to the manner in which ethical rules and regulations are presented to officers and employees. And just to illustrate this, San Francisco, for example, has references to rules and regulations which are contained in multiple different locations, and it can become difficult to maneuver while conducting the review. And I couldn't help but think if it was difficult to maneuver for me conducting the review, it would be equally confusing for employees or other officials. Another obvious topic that popped up while conducting this review was possible modifications relating to the board's authority. And I was struck by the range of sanctions options available to ethics boards in other jurisdictions. Authority ranged from non-binding advisory opinions or public admonishments to the ability to impose monetary fines and civil damages up to 3 times the amount of the funds in question. So certainly there are areas that we can borrow from these other codes as we look to update our code. I also want to acknowledge Michael Gale-Budo from our office, and then Stephanie Terra, a law student from the University of Minnesota, who both contributed to the research, as well as, of course, the ethics officer. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have related to the research.
Any member have a question? Or, oh, Ms. Trammell, did you want to add something?
I was just gonna say, seeing no questions, I wanted to tell you what our next steps will be. So prior to the next meeting, the one in May, we will be convening weekly as staff along with the Chair Kroll, to draft potential amendments for the board's consideration at the May and July meetings. And so we will start working on the sections, looking at the various other provisions that are available, the best practices, problems that I've seen from my time in the role as ethics officer, proof issues, all the things that we would need to do to bring to you some amendments that will improve our code. And we will be bringing the start of those to you beginning in May. Any questions for me or for Matt? No?
None from me.
Okay. So Chair Kroll, perhaps if there is no objection, the clerk could be directed to receive and file these verbal reports.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to this work that you were just outlining and seeing the results at our next meeting. Without objection, I will, and hearing none, I will direct the clerk to receive and file these verbal reports. Thank you. And that means that we are now moving on to the informal advice report, complaint activity report, and other activity report. Ms. Trammell?
Thank you, Chair Kroll. The first report is the monthly advice report. And as usual, I have provided the information in an attached document to the report. We had a rather reduced number of inquiries in this 2-month period since we last met. The most common inquiry this go round was outside employment. That makes sense because the outside employment forms were due for all employees. They're due on an annual basis, and they were due on January 25th, the Monday, I believe, the last Monday in the month. Also, the other category that had a high number, relatively speaking, is the political activity section, and that is to be expected, and I continue to believe that that will be a higher than usual number through the 2021 election, given that all 13 council members and the mayor are up for re-election, and there will likely be some charter amendments proposed as well. I do not recall that there were any specific questions that I wanted to bring or direct your attention to outside of one in which there was a question asked about outside employment, or excuse me, post-employment. And that question was the following scenario, and I said I would bring it to your attention to get your input, is that you have an official or an employee who is currently serving on a board or commission, okay? The current ethics code says that they can serve so even if business comes before them at the city. They are only required to file the statement, a potential conflict of interest form, that they have a potential conflict of interest. They're required to file the form, but they can still participate. So now the question becomes, when you look at the outside post-employment provisions, if you're looking at that provision and it says that you can't have any interest in which you made, you can't have financial interest in those companies that had business before you if you were active in those businesses. And the question becomes whether then the rule would switch from those who, they were permitted to participate previously. If they're going to continue to serve in that capacity, is now due to the post-employment, would their entity be precluded from seeking funding from the city, given that the elected official or the employee had previously served and was still serving as a board member? And I said that I did not think that that would impede their ability to serve, and that the entity would still be able to receive funding from the city, but that they could not hold employment with the entity that they were serving on the board. I'd like to open that up for a board discussion on that particular topic. Anyone have any comments about that analysis?
Well, thank you, Ms. Trammell. I do have a couple questions, but I would defer to the other members if they want to go first.
I don't have anything.
I don't either.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to make sure I understood it correctly.
Okay.
It sounded, maybe it would be easier if I said what I think I heard, and then you could tell me where I'm wrong or if I'm right. So it sounds like, and there might be somebody who was on a board or in a city position and has left that position and would like to work for a company that does business with the unit that person used to be on or be employed by. Is that the situation?
That is one of the potential. There's actually, I should maybe go back and clarify that. I think there are three potential things to consider in this. One, they continue to serve on that board, okay? And the board continues to apply for funding or has other matters of business between them and the city, okay? Second scenario is that they are currently on the board. Once they resign from the city, they want to work for this entity. While they were still a city employee, they made decisions and participated in decisions related to this organization, and now they're going to work for the organization. Okay. The third scenario is that they again served as a board member while they were a city official or employee. They're going to continue to serve as a board member, but they want to lobby or represent on matters before the city. Now, I didn't bring up that last one when I spoke again, because I don't think there's any debate on that one at all. Because the code section itself says that a local official, and meaning an elected official in this time, shall not represent or lobby on behalf of any person or organization on any matter before the city. So they can't represent or lobby for on any matters before the city. Okay, if that were an employee instead of an elected official, that same rule applies if they had participated in the business that was before the city when they were an employee. Okay, and so in either scenario, they participated while an employee, so they wouldn't be able to lobby now. So leaving that third piece out and going back to the first two alternatives, you have service at the city on the board and continued service on the board after the city. If they're not engaged in any discussions before the city, but the entity has business before the city, may they still serve in that board role? My answer would be yes, they can. Because otherwise that makes the rule that they can do so while they're employed, but not after they leave the city. That brings into question the rationality of that. The second scenario is that they served on the board previously, and now once they leave the city, they want to work for this entity. And I think that answer is that they can work for the entity, but if that entity is in a competitive process to obtain funds from the city or otherwise is negotiating with the city, they're precluded from getting those funds due to the 1-year contracting prohibition. So those were my answers. Did that help clarify it at all?
Yes, that did. I hope I'm not being redundant or repetitive. I just want to make sure I understand the first scenario, because I think I understand the second and third well. And the first is that they continue to work at the city. I guess could you repeat the first one? I don't know.
The first one is that they either worked for the city or they were an elected official of the city, and now they're leaving. And whether they're employed by this entity on which they served on the board or they're just still affiliated with it, they want to lobby this on matters before the city. And I said that they can't do that because they aren't allowed to lobby for a 1-year period after leaving city office.
Okay, I think I understand that. You know, the one thing that I was thinking about was the, which you see sometimes in ethics codes, and I know we have something similar, that you want to avoid the appearance of impropriety. I think we have that in some of the aspirational provisions of the city's code. It looks like we have a provision that says that that people should avoid actions that might impair independence of judgment or give the appearance of impropriety or of a conflict of interest. I know that's an ethical aspiration. And so I guess what I was trying to think about as you were talking about it, setting aside whatever specific rules we have, is whether any of the circumstances would give off the appearance of impropriety if they're not explicitly prohibited.
I think, Chair Crowell, there are many situations that would give the appearances of impropriety, but these people who are leaving the city, they're not so much concerned with the aspirations. They just want to know whether or not there's going to be some sort of complaint filed against them. They're just trying to do the bare minimum to comply and to not create further hassles down the road. You know, the appearance of impropriety exists every time an elected official serves on a board or commission for no pay, and then acts on matters at city council. That's always there, and this would be no different than that. And it would certainly not be to as great of extent. So I think that, summing it back up, it's like they can continue to serve on those boards, and the board isn't precluded from any contracts or business with the city. But if they get hired by the entity, then that entity can't seek the funding because of the 1-year prohibition.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Yeah. This is a really messy area, and this is one that I think we need to look at, because what's the enforceability of something like this for someone who has left the city? If someone were to take a position with an entity after they leave office, then want to do business with the city, really our only remedy, I think, would be to inform the city council and indicate that for the council to continue to do business with this entity during this year would violate the code, because we aren't going to have any control over the person who left.
All right, thank you. Is that the conclusion of your report on these, or?
That is on the only one that I wanted to talk to you about from the advice. And so if no one else has anything else on the advice log that they want to talk about, I'm prepared to move on to the next report. Okay. Seeing no questions, I will move on to the complaint report. So I first would like to tell you that due to the record-keeping spreadsheets, we are making some changes as to how we account for complaints. And that is so that at the end of the year, statistics will be able to be calculated a bit easier. And so each complaint that's filed, if a complaint names more than one person, those will be considered separate actual complaints, whereas previously we did not consider them as separate complaints. So there could be some differences in the way things are counted when we get to the next annual report, but we can start now to minimize the differences for the statistics that we use for complaints. And just notice to the public that we've changed the way we're counting them. So that's why it's different from previous years. We have had 11 total complaints so far this year. 5 are still pending and 6 have closed. Not many from the previous years have closed. They are all still open. And as I've noted many times before, sometimes these matters take a great deal of time, especially if something ends up going through arbitration. It can be open for a very lengthy period of time. So we're right on track for complaints. Advice log is down a bit, but complaints are running about average. Any questions about the complaint status report? Okay.
I do have a quick question.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
That's okay. So with the new counting, what do you anticipate? Well, maybe my question would be worded a little different. If we were to go back and look at 2020, for example, what would the number be if it had been counted the way we're counting it now? Or if you have a rough estimate, I'm just curious about the relative impact the numbers might look like.
So Chair Kroll, the I don't think that the numbers would change much for allegations. You know, the same number of allegations are out there. But the number of complaints would go up for complaints where we had multiple alleged violators of the code. I don't know how many of those there were last year, but there were a couple. A lot of times we get complaints where instead of one bad actor, so to say, there's two. That they're claiming two people were in cahoots doing this. And we've always listed them as A and B. And if you can recall from last year, Chair Kroll, some of our probable cause situations there was one complaint with more than one actor. And those will all be handled separately going forward in order to facilitate the tracking more easily and then not have to do so much manual counting at the end of the year. I could bring some numbers to share with you as to what that would mean for 2020 if you'd like to see them at the next meeting.
Well, thank you, Ms. Trammell. If it's not too much to ask, that would be interesting to see, and maybe we could make a note to reflect this, to make sure we're reflecting this in our next annual report. That way, the numbers are not misunderstood or misconstrued given the change in counting.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to do this recounting prior to the end of the year, no matter what. So, and probably for the last 3 or 4 years in order to continue to have the same types of charts. So some of this counting would need to be started now anyway. So I can get that done for you. And that's not a problem. Any other questions on the compliant report?
Not for me.
Okay. Then on the other activity report, I can't remember what I've done, so let me look. Okay, so we are still going through some gift card handling protocols. There are some departments that are wanting to use gift cards for participants in studies or participants who attend meetings or citizen participation in board activities. And so finance and I have been working on this protocol. There's also proposals about providing gift cards to volunteers and meeting attendees of various city boards and commissions. And so it raises a whole host of issues, and we are working through those issues. As Matt already reported, there's the code section comparison chart that was completed, and that was done by Matt. Both Matt and I reviewed the ethics section of the city clerk's transition manual. City clerk started with a document I had drafted back in 2013 and had changed sections of it and put them into his transition manual. This manual is used to advise current elected officials and their staff as to how things will work once there is the election and the transition that's required of those who are leaving office and those who are returning. And regardless of their status, every elected official and their staff have to comply with these various things in the transition manual. And a section of that manual, because it's also used by new elected officials, is the ethics section. I focused in 2 of the trainings that were held recently for aides to city council members. So we have sessions for mayoral members coming up on political activity. And that is a big area that the city will be working on in communicating more than once. This is just the beginning with the aides as to what the rules are about political activity. And that conversation was started. This manual's out there for them to use, but the manual itself does include other things besides just political activity. It touches on conflict of interest, outside employment, and gifts for the main topics. And then I drafted a proposal, a request for proposal to seek a provider for our anonymous hotline services. We have not gone out for RFP for those services since 2006 and 2007. We were working on that, and the line went active in 2008. We've had the same provider since, although they have merged with other companies and changed their name a number of times, but it's still the same entity. We issued that and had a pre-proposal conference last Friday. There were 4 companies that attended the pre-proposal conference, and I had heard that there were at least that many, if not more, who had downloaded the request for proposals. Those proposals are due on this coming Monday. And at that point, a team of us will be examining the proposals and meeting to interview finalists. The line needs to have a new contract come June 1st. Any questions on the other activity?
None from me.
I have a quick question about the final topic that you had mentioned, Ms. Trammell, the request for proposals, and who will ultimately make the decision on who to choose? Is that something that's going to come before our board, or is that a separate process?
That is a separate process, Chair Kroll. There are times where we have had various panels that have non-employees sit on them and review the request for proposals. But in this case, it will be the 3 individuals who are currently in charge of the hotline, which is myself as ethics officer, the internal auditor, who handles the complaints related to fraud and other financial matters, and then the HR department, the person who is in charge of the division that investigates the anti-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation complaints. The 3 of us plus Matt will be reviewing all of the proposals, and we will look at them for ease of use, cost, whether they can get the customization that we need in order to track. It's one thing that's very different about government versus a lot of their corporate clients is that the information that we track and report on regarding how cases closed, what the outcomes were, and we do so, in a de-identified status when we make our reports. And so we can't share that information with the complainant. And so we need to have 2 closure screens, so to say. We've not had that so far because of the Government Data Practices Act. When matters do not result in discipline, they oftentimes result in many other things like training, coaching, departmental changes, many other things could happen. We can't share that information with a complainant. So there's a few things unique to government that we'd like to try to see incorporated into a product. Whether we'll be successful in getting this for the pittance we have available, I don't know. But this is not a contract that we have spent much money on over the years. It runs around $4,000 a year. And so it's also something that we'll be trying to enter into a 5-year contract because no one has the time to do this on a more regular basis than that. Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Ms. Trammell. And without any objection, then I will direct the clerk to receive and file these reports. And that brings us to announcements. Our first announcement is related to a product called Microsoft OneDrive. Ms. Trammell?
Thank you, Chair Kroll. I wanted to let the board members know that we will no longer be emailing out any complaint packets to the board members. Our concern with the emailing out of board packets is that then these non-public data packets are out there on other drives and sometimes in people's work email and on another employer's system. And because the Government Data Practices Act applies to these documents and they are usually never deemed public, we need to take care to protect this data. So we will be setting up a OneDrive account, which you will all be granted access to when we have a complaint, and the documents will be placed in this OneDrive. And they won't be downloadable such that you'd be able to save them to your drives or anything. They'll just be accessible, read only in the system. And we will start using that and see how that works. And then you won't have anything that you need to take away from your records in your personal computers or your work computers that need to be destroyed. So we're hoping that that solves some of the concerns that we've had related to data and potential breach of data. The other announcement, if I recall, relates to data requests. Some, if not all of you, may have received a data request from the press. Over the past 2 months, I also received the same request, and your participation agreements with the city indicate that whenever you receive a data request, you will not engage in conversation with the person seeking the data, but instead refer the matter back to the city. And that would be referring it to myself as ethics officer. I then work with our communications department whenever there's a press inquiry, and they answer press inquiries, and I work with our Minnesota Government Data Practices officials, the responsible authority for the city, if it were a true Data Practices Act data request. So I will handle those for you, and you don't need to worry about them. You just need to refer them on to me. And that is the third, and not on the list, but somewhat related to data requests, is that if you are having any difficulties looking for the city's ethics board website, all of those links are new. There's a new website being put out there by our IT department, and included in that project are the various boards and commissions. And so that they have informed me that they haven't finished the website for the Ethical Practices Board, and that we should begin using the new links. So I will send to all of you those new links so that you have the link to the website as it's newly configured. And that is all I have for announcements.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Trammell. And actually on that last note, I happened to go to the new website, and it looked very nice on my phone. It looks like it's an adaptive website, so I encourage everyone to take a look at it. I did notice one thing, and that is on the members list. The roster says that Clinton was appointed in 2018. I think that's the carryover from the prior one that was listed there, but otherwise I thought it looked very nice.
I also noted that they haven't put up the annual report yet. So either that, or if my staff had done it in January, it fell off when they did this rollover. So I myself have not spent much time looking at it. So looks like I'll do some proofing of it over the next month or so.
Well, thank you for those announcements. And with that, I believe we have completed all items on the agenda. And so I will ask any members or staff if there's any other matters for this meeting. All right, I don't see anything. It looks like we might have a little shorter than usual meeting today. Then without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. And our next meeting will be May 18th, 2021.
Thank you, Chair
Okay.
Kroll.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Everyone
Thanks,
take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.